I recently took a vacation trip to Italy, and the day I went to Venice was one of those summer days where there's not a cloud in the sky. And so some of my Venice pictures were kind of uninteresting because of the boring skies. So I needed to find a way to add some clouds to those pictures from Venice. And I've already made a video showing how I used brushes, created brushes to add clouds to the sky. I'm going to show you in this video another approach where you can take all of the clouds in another image and move them to the image that needs improvement. The advantage is that using brushes, you're limited to individual clouds that have a dimension no larger than 5,000 pixels. That's just the limitation of Photoshop brushes. So here I can take all the clouds in this image and move them to this Venice photograph, and I can do it retaining the blue part of the sky in this Venice picture, which is quite radically different than the blue in my cloud picture here. So I'm going to show you how to do that so that you end up with a very natural looking result. I'm going to select both of these images, and I'm going to open them in Photoshop. So I go into Edit In, and I select Photoshop, and this will open the two images into separate files. Okay, now that we're in Photoshop, I'm going to take the cloud image, and I'm going to select the entire image. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going over to the image we want to add clouds to, and I'm going to paste it into this image. There are other ways of doing this, but this will work fine. Now we can see that we have the background here layer and the cloud layer. I like to have my cloud layer in between two other layers of the image you're changing. So I'm going to duplicate this bottom layer, and then I'm going to move it up above the cloud layer so that I have this sandwich of three layers. The first thing that we need to do is to remove the sky from this top layer so that the clouds show through. And once we've done that, I'm going to show you how you can modify the middle layer so that the blue of this image down in the bottom layer will show through so that the image has a very natural look. So first we need to get rid of the sky, mask the sky in this top layer. So I'm going to use my lasso tool, and I'm going to set it so that this is a new selection, and I'm going to try to find an area where I have the lightest and darkest sky. So maybe here is a good representation. But I think maybe it's even darker over here, so I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add to the selection by selecting the second icon. So we'll go over here where it seems like the sky is really dark. Go way down to where it's light. Okay, and we can add more. Maybe I'll just take a big chunk here and add that to the selection. And hopefully now I've gotten a pretty good sample of the sky. If at this point I go up to the Select menu, I can select Similar. And this will find all the other parts of the photo that are similar to the ones I've selected. And lo and behold, we've pretty much selected the entire sky. Now, it looks like we've selected some of the water because it's kind of similar in some ways to the sky. So all I need to do now is go up to this third icon, which will subtract from the selection, and I just grab all this water and remove it from the selection, and now we have exactly what we want, a complete selection of the sky. If I press the Q key, it makes a quick mask, and we can see what a nice job it's done of selecting the sky and only the sky. So at this point I want to make a layer mask, so I go up to layer mask, up to layer, and then to layer mask, and then I select hide selection, and this is going to hide this part of the sky in the layer, the entire sky in this particular layer, and let the sky underneath show through. Now you can see what an artificial look there is when you just paste in the sky from another photograph. Very unnatural look here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on this middle layer, and I'm going to make it so that the color of the sky in the bottom layer actually comes through where this is blue, but the clouds will remain. And we do that by using the screen mode, and the screen mode works like this. Wherever the middle layer is darker than the layer underneath it, then the bottom layer, the layer underneath it, shows through. But where it's lighter, like the clouds, it won't show through. Now, in order to have more control over what I'm doing, I like to work in black and white, since the color is irrelevant. So I'm going to change my photo to black and white, if I can find it. Here we go. And just to make sure the blue part is darker so that the blue from underneath shows through, I'm going to push the blue, the gray that represents the blue of the middle layer, down a lot. Now if I go too far, you can see parts of the clouds start disappearing. So I back up until I get the detail of the clouds and still have a dark gray. That looks pretty good to me. Okay, now all we need to do is go up here to the blending mode, and the default is normal, but we're going to go up and we're going to select what's called screen. And now we can see that it's letting this color from the bottom layer come through, but it's not letting it come through where the clouds are because they're very light colored. And we get a much more natural looking result. If I turn off this layer and compare it to the layer underneath, it looks to me like the blue of the sky is a little too light if we look at the original here. So I'm going to go up to levels, and I'm going to push this up a bit to see if I can get the sky a little darker. And now I'm letting more and more of the bottom layer come through. If I go all the way, it looks like that. And I want to keep adding the clouds, but I don't want it to darken the sky a lot. So maybe something right in that area will be a good result. So now if we compare, it doesn't look like, it looks like the sky in the bottom layer doesn't change. So that looks like a pretty good result to me. The only thing that's a little disappointing is that there's still a lot of blue here. I'd like to move these clouds up a bit if I can. So I'm going to take my pointing tool here, and I'm going to make sure I have the middle layer selected. I'm going to try pushing these clouds up a bit, see if it looks a little better. And I think that makes for a much nicer result. Yeah. So, you know, this is an artistic decision, but I think that makes for a much nicer result. So all I need to do now is flatten this image, and I always do that because if you don't, you end up with a really big, massive file being passed to Lightroom. So I'm going to flatten the entire image, and then I'm going to save it so that we get a file, a PSD file, passed back to Lightroom. And here we have our new image with the clouds added to it. At this point, the only thing I might do is I might go into the develop module and sometimes the clouds end up being very white, and at the time of day I took this image, there was quite a lot of warmth to the light. So sometimes I take my, I didn't want to do that. I go to the brush tool and I'll push up the temperature and I'll just brush on some of that warmth into the clouds so that the clouds match the light of the time of day I took this picture. And you know, once again, this is an artistic decision. But let's see what it looks like if we warm these clouds up. So I think this even helps make the photo look even more natural. And so that's the result. And the nice thing about using this approach to adding clouds to your picture is you don't have to worry so much about the placement of the clouds. I find with the brushes that sometimes the placement looks a little bit too, I don't know, intentional. And here we have very natural arrangement of the clouds because obviously nature is what arranged the clouds in the first place. So this is not too difficult a way of bringing clouds into your image without radically changing the color balance and ending up with a very natural looking result.